for more on this, I'm joined now by my guest, President of Media Group Cato Voice, Amici Pellissier. Hello, thank you very much for being with us. Now, considering her works and influence and the image of the Catholic Church, how she's changed that image, why has it taken almost 10 years for us to get to this point and for Mother Teresa to be canonised?
I think, well, first of all, her canonization is taking place 19 years after her death. And I think it just shows how much of a long-term process this is, because what you have to realize is when you beatify or then canonize someone, you are saying that she or he will be an example for other believers, an example in her life, in her virtues, in her struggles. And of course, you would not want any mistake to happen in the process.
So is there a vetting process before the canonisation?
So it's not exactly a voting process. What happens is you have 4 steps. So the first step usually is kind of a popular demand coming from people who've known the saint in the diocese where she or he lived. And then they will go to the bishop of that diocese, who, and that's the second step, then opens an investigation into that person's lives, works and miracles, if they've been reported. During that process, he will have around him theologians, historians, any kind of experts he will need. And then once the conclusions have been reached, he sends them all to the Vatican. And that's the third step, where you have what we call the Congregation for the Cause of the Saints. In other words, a big Vatican body who specializes in sainthood, who will examine all the conclusions of these reports. And if I remember, in the case of Mother Teresa, we had over 80 volumes and 35,000 pages of conclusions to be examined, and then that commission gives its decision, and that's the fourth and final step. The Pope then takes the final decision and agrees or not to proclaim saint that person.
And you mentioned the word miracles there. Do we know which are the miracles that have been attributed to Mother Teresa?
So we know that one of the very important miracles is the second one, the one which happened between the beatification and the canonization, because you need one for the beatification, and then you need another one which must take place between the beatification, so here 2003, and the canonization, to declare that person saint. And that miracle happened in Brazil, and a Brazilian patient was cured from a disease that no medical explanation could account for.
Right. And what is the role of a saint in the Catholic Church?
So a saint, when the Pope proclaims that someone is a saint, he does 3 things. One is he gives that person as an example for other believers to follow and to look up to. The second is he says, and that's really important for us, that person will be an intercessor. It's someone who's really close to God and someone who's an ally, if you want, for us. And we can bring our prayers to that person and trust that that person will then bring our prayers to God. Someone a little bit more accessible than God himself, if you want. And then the third very important aspect is that it goes back to the miracles of that person, and there's always something of an extraordinary dimension to his or her life that makes them great figures that will inspire you in your daily lives.
Now, on Sunday, it's Pope Francis who will be making Mother Teresa a saint. Mm-hmm. Is it very fitting that he's the one to see this process through?
It's more than fitting. I remember people being very excited when Pope John Paul II beatified Mother Teresa back in the early 2000. And with Pope Francis, we know that he shares the same commitment to reaching out to the lowest sections of society. He's the one who's always talking about going to the peripheries. And we have here a young nun from Central Europe who left her country, who left everything and went to India, what a periphery, in the 1940s, to give her life to the poor, to the untouchables, to those who were rejected from society. And Pope Francis, I think, warms really to the charisma of Mother Teresa. And in the preface to a book on her that he gave, so he gave a preface to this book, he called her a bridge builder. And when you're familiar with, the language of Pope Francis, you know that's the utmost Christian quality that he sees in the 21st century.
And including building bridges with people outside of the Catholic community.
Yes, of course. I think Mother Teresa is an example of someone who's acclaimed and recognized by everybody, Catholics and non-Catholics alike. You know, for example, that back in the 1980s, I think 1985, the UN Secretary General called her the most powerful woman in the world. And so over 30 years later, she has her own special day, the Day of Charity, sponsored by the UN on September 5th. There's an exhibition in the United Nations on her. The Prime Minister of India has paid tribute to her, and he's not known for his particularly warm position towards the Catholic Church. So that shows you how much of an impact she's had. And I think her motto, which was hands to serve and hearts to love, really resonates with many people inside and outside the church.
And in that report, we saw one doctor whose life was changed by Mother Teresa. Who are her other spiritual heirs?
So her spiritual heirs are one group of heirs, of course, are the people who carried on her work in her congregation in the over 500 houses that she founded all around the world. And also then her spiritual heirs are, I would say, all of us, particularly since her death. We've been given access to some of her very private writings. And we know, for example, that she struggled a lot in her faith. We know she did all of those extraordinary deeds of charity in the name of God. But actually, when you read her letters to the priest who guided her spiritually, you realize that she felt God was absent. She had terrible difficulties in her faith, and she called it a spiritual night. And I think that's a very important legacy for many believers, anyway, for myself.
Amici Pellissier, thank you very much for having come and spoken to us. And that's where we're leaving this hour live from Paris. Stay tuned, we'll have a full update at the top of the hour.